Good morning, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Mr. Wilkinson here. It is March 30th. I would like to do a little bit of review with you guys on aggregate supply and aggregate demand and the production possibility curve, and then try to put those two guys together. Anyway, thanks for listening. I appreciate it. Write this down in your notes. If we make it back to school, I'll collect the notes at the end of the quarter like normal. And if not, I'll figure out a way of giving you the credit. Thanks, guys. All right, here we go. I want to get back to the aggregate supply and the aggregate demand. We are talking about everything in the economy, the macro level. So when we're talking about everything that we produce in the country in the course of the year, what goes down here is real GDP, how much stuff we make, everything we make. And what goes along here is the price of everything, and we call that the price level. I hope that looks vaguely familiar. All right, fine folks. I got a downward sloping curve. Because it's a downward sloping curve, I know it's demand, down demand, and it's because it's the demand for everything. This is going to be aggregate demand. Now, aggregate demand can go to the right or to the left for reasons that if you think about our circular flow diagram, if consumers spend more, aggregate demand goes to the right. If businesses spend more, aggregate demand goes to the right. If government spends more, aggregate demand goes to the right. And if net exports increases, that means we're selling more than we're bringing in. That shifts aggregate demand to the right as well. Those are the shifters of aggregate demand, the circular flow diagram plus government plus X. Alrighty, I have my aggregate supply curve. Aggregate supply curve is right there, and it goes to the right or to the left. It goes to the right when the economy gets bigger. It gets bigger for two reasons. We have more factors of production, more land, labor, and capital, and technological improvements. Now, technology is not just like a computer, it's any better way of doing something. So, aggregate supply will go up if we have more workers, more land, and more capital, and technology tends to move the aggregate supply curve to the right. We are currently operating where the aggregate supply and the aggregate demand intersect. That is where we are operating. All right, guys? Onward to the production possibility curve. Production possibility curve on the micro level could be like pizzas and lasagnas for Margarita's little at-home restaurant. On the macro level, we want to include everything in the economy. So I'm going to put butter down here, and butter represents everything civilian. And I'm going to put guns right here. And the production possibility curve looks like that. Now, we are typically operating, hopefully, on the production possibility curve, which means we are operating efficiently. We're making the good use of what we have. We are underutilizing or inefficient down here and unobtainable, or we can't do it in the long run out here. Now, the economy tends to get bigger over time if we have more factors of production and technology. So this production possibility curve 10 years ago would have been down here, and 10 years from now will probably be out there because the economy is getting bigger. Production possibility curve. Hope that's okay, guys. Now I wanted to show you something to put these two guys together. We are operating efficiently on the production possibility curve as a nation if we are operating on that curve. So if I'm going to draw a horizontal line right there, and what that represents is the amount of butter that we make. The amount of butter that we're making right here is represented by that red line. If I draw a vertical line at that point, that would be the amount of guns that we're making, and think of those as pieces of string. If those are pieces of string and I want to combine it with this graph, this is real GDP, this is price level, and I'm going to take the length of that red one, it's about that big, And I'll make it as precise as possible. And I'm going to draw that horizontally over there. That represents how much civilian manufacturing we're making. Now I'm going to take that blue one, that little G right there, how much military we have, and put it right there. So that represents the guns that we make. So the red represents the butter, and the G represents the guns. If I go to that point and I draw a vertical line, we want to be operating on this vertical line because anywhere on this production possibility curve is operating efficiently. And if I take those two pieces and add them together, that's where I am. This is called the long run aggregate supply curve. The long run aggregate supply curve is where we want to be. Hope that's okay. There are 3 scenarios that I'd like to go over with you, and then we'll call it a day for this lesson. All right, scenario number 1 is a recession. A lot of people are saying that we are going to be going into a recession because of what's going on with the virus 19. And I guess the numbers will verify that fairly soon. But just so you know, this is how a recession would appear in this model. We got real GDP right here. We got price level right here. We have our aggregate supply, aggregate demand, sorry, and we have our aggregate supply, and we are operating at that intersection point. That is where we are. That is where we are. Now, if I wanted to represent a recession, I'm going to put in a vertical line representing where we want to be. This is the long run aggregate supply. We want to be producing at this level of GDP, but we're actually producing at that level of GDP. We have less GDP than we ought to. That is in a recession. Our actual is below where we're supposed to be. Number 2 scenario, and there's only 3, is an inflationary period. In an analogy here, a recession is a car going down the freeway super slow. It's not keeping up. It's going too slow. An inflationary period is just the opposite. The economy is speeding out of control. It's going too fast. So, the same model as before, real GDP, price level goes here. I have aggregate demand. I have aggregate supply, and remember guys, we are operating at the intersection point. That's where we actually are. Now in an inflationary period, we are operating beyond our capacity. We're working 24 hours a day. We're busting our hump. We're not resting at all. We can do it for a while, but it's not sustainable on the long run. So we are operating beyond our means. So remember guys, the long run aggregate supply is where we want to be. This is where we want to be, and this is where we are. Notice guys, that we are operating beyond our means. And that's an inflationary period. Our last scenario, ladies and gentlemen, is where we want to be. Number 3, our happy spot. Our happy spot. That is where we are, where we're supposed to be. Same as before. I have real GDP. I got price level. I got aggregate demand. I got aggregate supply. That intersection point is the equilibrium where all the buyers and all the sellers come together. And if I wanted to draw a economy that's where it's supposed to be, I draw the long run aggregate supply right at the intersection right there, and that is our happy spot. Hope this made sense. No homework today guys, just recognize that the long run aggregate supply is just where the economy should be, and it's just a different version of the production possibility curve. More lessons coming soon. Hope this made sense. Take care of yourself. I hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.